In order to really commit to stacking precious metals, you need to think a little differently than your average investor. Starting off with that word, investing. Are gold and silver really even an investment in the truest sense of the word? In some ways, they are. You could buy some gold and some silver with the hopes of selling it in the future for a profit for a higher price than you paid for your metals. But gold and silver also are lacking a few elements that other investments possess. First of all, they have no yield. And this is really a major downside to stacking precious metals. If you invest in a stock, for example, you could sell it for a capital gain in the future, but also you could be rewarded and paid to hold on to the stock, getting paid in the form of dividends. And gold and silver, they're never going to pay you any dividends. In fact, you might even say that gold and silver have a negative yield of sorts because you have to store them or you have to pay somebody to store them. So gold and silver actually end up costing you to hang on to them. And, I do use the word investing to refer to precious metals sometimes, but really, at the end of the day, to me, stacking gold and silver is a lot more like saving because you consider gold and silver a lot of things. You can call them assets, you can call them inflation hedges, you can call them insurance against certain catastrophic events. But really, when it comes down to it, gold and silver are what they have always been for thousands of years, and that's money. Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. I want to say a big thank you to you for tuning into today's video. If you enjoy it and you get some value from it, please do give it a big thumbs up down below. And today's video is brought to you by SD Bullion, so don't forget to check them out with the link down in the description. Now, one difference between saving in hard money like gold and silver or a paper currency like the dollar is that you can't earn a yield on your savings in precious metals either. I mean, if you're saving in cash in dollars, you can put them in the bank and you can earn interest. And, today that might not be too enticing, even with the Fed hiking rates and a slightly better yield on bank deposits than we've seen in recent years. Real rates, they're still firmly in negative territory, meaning that whatever yield you are getting on your cash, it's not keeping up with inflation. Saving in paper currency, that was a much better deal back when we had sound money backed by gold, because if you could have gold-backed dollars and save them, well, you'd get the best of both worlds. You'd be getting a yield and you'd have an asset that was as good as gold, right? But the problem with that, it's the same problem you run into with a lot of paper assets, and that's counterparty risk. Back in 1971, Richard Nixon ended that convertibility of dollars into gold. And if you saved in paper, well, that was just too bad because after that date, all that cash that you saved, if you wanted to turn it into gold, you had to go out onto the market and pay whatever the going market rate was. And the only thing backing up that cash is the promise of central bankers. And if history teaches us one thing about the promises of central bankers, it's that those who rely on them ultimately end up getting burned. But it's still important to note that by saving in metals like gold and silver, you are still giving some things up. Gold and silver, under most conditions, they're not going to grow your wealth, not the way that other investments like stocks, bonds, businesses, or real estate are going to. But obviously, there's still a reason that gold and silver have been around and have been used as money for so long. And there's a reason that central banks hold and continue to accumulate gold. Right now, by the way, they're purchasing gold at the fastest rate in more than 50 years. So clearly, physical metals do have something going for them, despite some of their accompanying setbacks. And the real reason for that? Well, the big reason is that you can trust gold and silver. No one's going to default on them. No one can inflate them away. No one can make more of them with just a touch of a button. No one can sanction them, not effectively anyway. And at the end of the day, if you hold them, you really do own them. And in today's world of trillions of dollars in debt and unfunded obligations, quadrillions in paper derivatives, runaway inflation, massive government spending, currency wars, sanctions, de-dollarization schemes, and just generally sky-high levels of uncertainty, well, assets without the counterparty risk, they're starting to look pretty appealing. And no other asset, with the exception of maybe food, water, and the tools needed to meet the necessities of life, comes with the implicit guarantee of security that metals do. A friend of mine, Sean Fu, says that gold and silver are like credit default swaps on a currency collapse. They're insurance against economic reset. And the cost of stacking, of storing the metal, the opportunity cost of not investing in other assets with better growth prospects, well, that cost, it's like an insurance premium. And a currency reset or a currency collapse, a sovereign debt crisis, it's not an event that occurs very often. It's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. But if you study history, and specifically the history of fiat paper currencies, you're going to find one commonality among all of them, and that is they always fail. Eventually, one way or another, governments and central banks end up abusing them and destroying them. And when an event like that occurs, the benefits of holding hard assets like gold and silver, well, they're going to become very clear to everyone. And I would say it's a good bet for almost everyone watching this video. There's only been one dominant currency in the world for your entire life, the US dollar. And human psychology, it's kind of a funny thing. Normalcy bias, it's a very powerful force in our way of thinking. And it's hard for us to imagine that something like the dollar that has always been there for us could ever go away. But as far as fiat currencies go, the dollar's getting kind of long in the tooth, and there's no guarantee that it's going to be around, at least not in its current form, forever. Right now, at this very moment, the New York Fed is testing its new central bank digital currency. Nations around the world are dumping US debt. Groups like BRICS are actively seeking to undermine the dollar's status as the world reserve currency. And the politicians in Washington, from both parties, mind you, they continue to borrow and spend like a bunch of drunken sailors. And that's why, even though gold and silver are not perfect investments, let's face it, nothing is, I still think it makes a lot of sense to be stacking. Nothing in this video is financial advice, it's all just food for thought. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe and happy stacking, everyone. I'll catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.